I'm Diane, 34 years old, and I'll never forget the sight of my parents standing on my doorstep with their suitcases, demanding to move in after they just sold their $850,000 house and given $650,000 to my brother Kevin. The betrayal cut deep, but what they said next made my blood run cold. We're family, Diane. You have to take us in. We have nowhere else to go. This is the story of how I learned that blood isn't always thicker than water. Before I dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and manipulation, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you dealing with similar family dynamics? Please hit that like button if you've ever felt like the forgotten child, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. Growing up as the younger sister to Kevin, who's 36 now, I learned early that in my parents' eyes, I would always come second. It wasn't just small things, though those hurt too. When Kevin turned 16, my parents surprised him with a brand new car, complete with a big red bow in the driveway. When I turned 16 2 years later, I got a card with a $20 bill and a reminder that the city bus route was very reliable. That set the tone for everything that followed. College was where the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Kevin wanted to study business at a private university that cost $60,000 a year. My parents didn't even blink. They refinanced the house, dipped into their savings, and proudly sent their golden boy off to pursue his dreams. When it was my turn, despite having better grades and getting accepted to my dream school, I was told that State University was good enough and that I should be grateful for the opportunity to build character by taking out student loans. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing, drowning in $40,000 of debt while Kevin barely scraped by with C's and D's. The wedding comparisons were almost laughable if they weren't so hurtful. Kevin's wedding to Laura was a $50,000 extravaganza. My parents flew in relatives from across the country, rented out an entire vineyard, and my mother spent months planning every detail with Laura. My wedding to Mark? We got $2,000 and a suggestion to keep it simple. My mother showed up an hour before the ceremony and complained about the flowers the entire time. But perhaps the most painful part was watching my parents pour money into Kevin's failed business ventures. The first was a restaurant that closed within 6 months. My parents lost $30,000. The second was an app development company that never developed a single app. Another $50,000 gone. The third was a cryptocurrency investment firm that turned out to be barely legal. $75,000 vanished into thin air. Each time, my parents would console Kevin, tell him he was learning valuable lessons, and write another check. Meanwhile, I built my marketing firm from scratch, working 18-hour days, sleeping in my office, and eating ramen noodles for months. When I landed my first major client, my parents' response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Kevin's thinking about starting a new venture?" When I bought my own house at 28, fully on my own merit and savings, they didn't even come to see it for 3 months. They were too busy helping Kevin look at McMansions he couldn't afford. My husband Mark noticed the pattern before I was willing to fully acknowledge it. "Diane, when was the last time your parents asked about your business?" he'd ask gently. Or, "Did you notice they left your award ceremony early to go to Kevin's barbecue?" I'd make excuses, tell myself they were just busy, that they loved us both equally but showed it differently. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. The breaking point came 6 months ago when I won the Regional Business Excellence Award for Female Entrepreneurs. It was a huge honor, something I'd worked toward for years. The ceremony was on a Saturday evening, and I'd told my parents about it 3 months in advance. That morning, my mother called to say they couldn't make it. Kevin was having a pool party, you see, and they'd already promised to bring their famous potato salad. I started therapy after that incident. My therapist, Dr. Jennifer Chin, helped me understand that being the scapegoat child in a narcissistic family dynamic wasn't my fault. She taught me about boundaries, self-worth, and the importance of chosen family. Mark was incredible through all of it, reminding me daily that I was worthy of love and respect. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. The favoritism I'd endured my whole life was about to escalate into something far more sinister. 3 months before my parents showed up at my door with their suitcases, they called a mandatory family dinner. The term mandatory should have been my first red flag. In 34 years, they'd never called anything mandatory except when they needed to bail Kevin out of trouble. I remember Mark raising an eyebrow when I told him about it. "What's Kevin done now?" he asked, only half joking. The dinner was at their house, the same 4-bedroom colonial where Kevin and I had grown up. Walking through that door always felt like stepping back in time, like I was still that invisible little girl desperately trying to earn a scrap of attention. The house smelled like my mother's pot roast, which she only made for special occasions or when she was trying to soften bad news. Kevin was already there when we arrived, lounging in Dad's recliner like he owned the place, Laura perched on the arm beside him, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when we walked in. Kevin gave us his trademark smirk, the one that said he knew something we didn't. "Hey, sis," he said, in that condescending tone he perfected over the years. "Glad you could make it to the family meeting." My parents seemed nervous, which was unusual. My mother kept fidgeting with her napkin during dinner, and my father cleared his throat approximately every 30 seconds. Finally, over dessert, they dropped their bomb. "We've decided to sell the house," my father announced, as casually as if he were telling us about changing cable providers. The silence that followed was deafening. This house wasn't just property, it was the family home, the place where theoretically all the memories lived. I felt a pang of loss, thinking about future grandchildren who would never play in the backyard where Kevin and I had grown up. "Why?" I managed to ask. "You love this house. You always said you'd stay here forever." My mother jumped in quickly, too quickly. "Oh, well, it's just getting to be too much for us. All this maintenance, the yard work, the stairs. We're not getting any younger." She was 65 and did yoga 4 times a week. My father was 68 and had just completed his 3rd marathon. The maintenance excuse was laughable. Kevin's fake concern was Oscar-worthy. "Oh, Mom, Dad, are you sure? I mean, this is our childhood home. So many memories here." Laura actually looked up from her phone to nod solemnly, like she hadn't been complaining about how dated and suburban my parents' house was just last Thanksgiving. That's when I noticed the look that passed between Kevin and my father. Just a quick glance, but it spoke volumes. They'd already discussed this. This dinner wasn't an announcement, it was a performance. "When are you planning to list it?" Mark asked, his hand finding mine under the table. "Oh, we already have," my mother said brightly. "The realtor says in this market, it should sell quickly. We've already had several showings." Already had showings? They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months, and this was the first we were hearing about it. Later, while my mother was in the kitchen getting coffee, I overheard Kevin talking to my father in hushed tones. "The timeline's perfect," Kevin was saying. "The investors are ready to move forward as soon as I have the capital." My father clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, son. Your mother and I have got you covered." Over the next few weeks, I tried to get more information. Every conversation was deflected with vague responses about downsizing and simplifying their lives. Meanwhile, I noticed Laura posting photos of expensive shopping sprees on social media. New designer bags, jewelry, spa days. When I mentioned this to Mark, he pulled up Kevin's business social media. He'd been posting about a revolutionary new venture and big things coming soon. I decided to drive by the house one evening and saw the sold sign in the yard. My heart sank. I called Emma, our youngest sister who lives in London, over video chat that night. "Something's not right," she said immediately when I told her what was happening. "Mom and Dad would never sell unless, oh God, Diane. You don't think they're giving him the money, do you?" The thought had crossed my mind, but hearing Emma say it out loud made it real. "He's probably convinced them it's an investment," I said, feeling sick. "You know how he is. He probably has a whole presentation about how they'll triple their money." Emma's face was grim on the screen. You need to talk to them, Diane. This is their retirement we're talking about. But every attempt I made to discuss it was shut down. When I brought up concerns about their financial security, my mother actually laughed. Oh, Diane, always so worried about money. We'll be fine. Better than fine, actually. The house sold for $850,000. I found out from a neighbor, not my parents. They'd lived there for 35 years, bought it for barely $100,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage, they'd clear at least $800,000. That was their entire nest egg, their security, their future. And I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly where it was going. The family meeting to discuss what my parents were doing with the house money was held at a restaurant, neutral territory, which should have been my second warning sign. My parents chose Antonio's, an upscale Italian place that Kevin loved and I found pretentious. They'd reserved a private dining room, which seemed excessive for a family of 6, but nothing my parents did regarding Kevin ever seemed bound by normal logic. Emma was joining us via video call from London, her face projected on a tablet at the end of the table. It was 2 a.m. her time, but she'd insisted on being present. I have a bad feeling about this, she'd texted me earlier. Mark sat beside me, his hand on my knee under the table, a steady presence as my anxiety climbed with each passing minute. Kevin and Laura arrived 15 minutes late, as usual, making an entrance like they were celebrities gracing us peasants with their presence. Laura was wearing a new dress that I recognized from a boutique downtown, the kind where a single garment cost more than most people's rent. Kevin had on a new watch, something flashy and undoubtedly expensive. They were both practically glowing with anticipation. My father stood up once everyone was settled, clearing his throat in that way he did when he was about to make a proclamation. Your mother and I have asked you here to share some exciting news about our future plans. He looked at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. As you know, we've sold the house. After careful consideration and much discussion, we've decided how to allocate the proceeds. My stomach dropped as he continued. Kevin has presented us with an incredible business opportunity. His new venture, a luxury car rental service for high-end clients, has amazing potential. We've decided to invest $650,000 as seed money. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. 650,000. Out of 850,000. I couldn't breathe. That's wonderful. Laura squealed, clapping her hands like a child who'd just been told they were going to Disney World. Kevin tried to look humble and grateful, but I could see the satisfaction radiating from him. This had been his plan all along. Emma's face on the tablet had gone pale. Mom, Dad, she said, her voice tinny through the speaker, that's almost everything. What about your retirement? What about emergencies? My mother waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Emma, don't be so dramatic. We have our pensions, and Kevin has assured us this investment will pay dividends. We'll be silent partners, drawing income from the business. Silent partners. In Kevin's 4th business venture, after 3 spectacular failures that had already cost them over $150,000. What about the rest of the money? I heard myself asking, my voice sounding distant and strange. My father smiled like he was about to deliver more good news. Well, $200,000 will go into trust funds for Kevin's children. Laura's pregnant again, you see. Laura patted her still flat stomach with a smug smile. And the remaining $50,000 will cover some immediate expenses and moving costs. The unfairness of it all crashed over me in waves. Kevin was getting everything. Again. Not just the majority, but quite literally everything. And Diane? Mark asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. What about Emma? What about your other children? My parents exchanged a look that I'd seen 1,000 times before, the one that said I was being difficult and unreasonable. Well, Diane has her successful business, my mother said, as if that explained everything. She doesn't need our help. We're so proud of how independent she is. And Emma has her life in London. This is about helping Kevin get established. Established? The word exploded out of me. He's 36 years old. How many times does he need to get established? How many failed businesses are you going to fund before you realize he's not a businessman? He's a con artist who happens to share your DNA. The table went silent. Laura's face had turned ugly, all pretense of sweetness gone. How dare you, she hissed. Kevin works harder than anyone I know. Just because you got lucky with your little marketing thing doesn't mean you get to judge us. Lucky? I laughed, but it was a broken sound. I worked 18-hour days. I slept in my car. I ate one meal a day for months to save money. I built my business with no help, no handouts, no safety net, while Kevin burned through your money like it was paper. And you call that luck? My father's face had turned red. Diane, you're being unfair. Kevin has had some setbacks, yes, but this time is different. He's learned from his mistakes. Emma's voice cut through from the tablet. Has he though? Because from where I'm sitting, the only thing he's learned is that you'll always bail him out. What happens when this business fails too? What will you live on? It won't fail. Kevin finally spoke, his mask slipping to reveal the entitled child he'd always been. I've done the research. I have investors lined up. This is my time. Just because Diane lucked into some clients doesn't mean she's the only one who can be successful. There it was again. Luck. As if my success was an accident while his failures were just unfortunate circumstances. Mark stood up, pulling me with him. We should go, he said quietly. There's nothing more to say here. As we gathered our things, my mother reached out to touch my arm. Diane, please don't be like this. We're not getting any younger. Who knows how many more years we have? Don't ruin this with jealousy. Jealousy. They thought this was about jealousy. Not about watching them throw away their security on a serial failure. Not about the lifetime of being told I wasn't worth investing in. Just jealousy. Emma's voice followed us out. Diane, I'll call you later. Mom, Dad, you're making a huge mistake. In the car, I finally broke down. 34 years of being the responsible one, the independent one, the one who didn't need help, and this was my reward. Watching them hand everything to Kevin on a silver platter while telling me I should be grateful for the opportunity to struggle. Mark held me while I sobbed, promising we'd get through this together. But I knew something had fundamentally broken that night. The last illusion that my parents might someday see me as equal to Kevin was gone. 2 months after that devastating dinner, I was having my morning coffee when the doorbell rang. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday, far too early for solicitors or delivery people. Mark was in the shower, so I padded to the door in my robe and slippers, expecting maybe a neighbor needing something. What I found instead made me wonder if I was still dreaming. My parents stood on my doorstep with matching luggage sets, the expensive kind they'd bought for their anniversary cruise 3 years ago. My mother was wearing her traveling clothes, the outfit she always wore for long trips. My father had on his lucky baseball cap, the one he wore for new adventures. But the expression on their faces wasn't adventurous. It was desperate. Good morning, sweetheart, my mother said, trying for brightness but achieving something closer to manic. We need to talk to you about something important. Can we come in? Without waiting for an answer, she stepped forward, forcing me to either block her physically or step aside. I stepped aside, too stunned to do anything else. They wheeled their suitcases into my foyer like it was a hotel lobby, looking around with calculating eyes. My father nodded approvingly. You've done well with the place, Diane. Very spacious. How many bedrooms did you say it was? 4. I hadn't said. They'd never asked. In the 6 years I'd owned this house, they'd visited exactly 3 times. What's going on? I managed to ask as they made themselves comfortable in my living room. Mark appeared at the top of the stairs, hair still wet, taking in the scene with widening eyes. Why do you have suitcases? The look my parents exchanged told me everything I needed to know before they even opened their mouths. "Well," my father began, using his business voice, the one he used when he was about to say something he knew I wouldn't like. "There's been a slight change in our living situation." Slight change. That's how he characterized what came next. They'd given Kevin all the money from the house sale, just as they'd announced. But what they hadn't mentioned at that dinner was that they'd also given him their savings. All of it. "We wanted to really invest in his success," my mother explained, as if this made perfect sense. "The business needed more capital than we initially thought. Kevin said the more we invested, the bigger our returns would be. So we liquidated our savings accounts, our investment portfolio, even cashed out Dad's retirement fund early." The room spun. Mark came down the stairs slowly, like he was approaching wild animals. "You gave him everything?" I whispered. "Every penny you had?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "Not gave, invested. There's a difference. We're partners in the business. Once it takes off, we'll be set for life." The delusion was breathtaking. They'd handed their entire life savings to a man who'd failed at every business venture he'd ever attempted. "So where have you been living?" Mark asked, his voice carefully neutral. That's when the full picture emerged. After selling the house, they'd moved in with Kevin and Laura, into their new McMansion purchased with my parents' money. The plan was for them to live in the in-law suite, a happy multi-generational family. That lasted exactly 2 months. "Laura needs her space," my mother said defensively. "She's pregnant, you know, and she says having us there is stressing her out. The doctor says stress isn't good for the baby." The baby. The third child they couldn't afford without my parents' money. And Kevin feels caught in the middle, poor thing. He says once the business is profitable, he'll buy us our own condo. "When will that be?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Never. It would never be profitable because Kevin didn't know how to run a business. He knew how to sell dreams to desperate parents who couldn't see him for what he was. "Soon," my father said with false confidence. "Very soon. But in the meantime, we need somewhere to stay. And you have all this space." There it was. The reason for the suitcases, the early morning ambush, the calculating looks at my home. They'd given everything to Kevin, been kicked out when they were no longer useful, and now they expected me to pick up the pieces. The child they'd never invested in, never believed in, never supported was now their backup plan. "No," I said, the word coming out stronger than I felt. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, hurt, anger, then settled on manipulation. "Diane, we're your parents. We're family. Family helps family. We'd do the same for you." Would they? When had they ever? "You had $850,000, I said slowly. Plus your savings. Plus Dad's retirement. You gave it all to Kevin. All of it. And now you want to live in my house? The house I bought myself, with no help from you, while paying off student loans you wouldn't help with?" My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I'd seen this performance before. "We're old, Diane. We're in our 60s. Where are we supposed to go? Live on the street? Is that what you want? Your elderly parents homeless while you live in this big house all alone?" All alone. Mark cleared his throat at that, reminding them he existed. "We're not heartless," he said. "But we're also not a hotel. You made your choice. You chose to give everything to Kevin. That was your decision." My father's facade cracked then, showing the angry man underneath. "We didn't have a choice. Kevin needed our help. He's trying to build something. With your money." I shot back. "Always with your money. When does it end, Dad? When he's burned through everything and you're actually homeless?" The argument escalated from there. My mother cried. My father yelled. They pulled out every manipulation tactic in their arsenal. They were old and frail. I was successful and had room. They'd raised me, didn't that count for something? What would people think if I turned away my own parents? The guilt trip express was running at full speed. But something had changed in me since that dinner 2 months ago. The therapy, Mark's support, Emma's validation from across the ocean, it had all built up a wall around my heart. I wasn't the little girl desperate for scraps of approval anymore. I was a successful woman who'd built her life without their help, and I didn't owe them anything. "I'll pay for a hotel for 1 week," I heard myself saying. 1 week to figure out your next move. Maybe Kevin will change his mind. Maybe you can get some of your money back. But you're not moving in here. The explosion that followed was spectacular. My mother accused me of being heartless. My father said I was ungrateful. They brought up every sacrifice they'd ever made, conveniently forgetting all the sacrifices they'd never made. When they finally left, after Mark threatened to call the police, I stood in my foyer looking at the space where their suitcases had been. They'd chosen Kevin. They'd always chosen Kevin. And now they expected me to save them from that choice. But I was done being their safety net while Kevin was their golden parachute. I was done being second best. They'd made their bed, and now they had nowhere to lie in it. The week I'd paid for at the hotel passed in a blur of increasingly frantic phone calls and text messages. My parents had gone from pleading to demanding to threatening in record time. When the hotel checkout came and went, they didn't move to another hotel or find an apartment. Instead, they decided to wage war on my boundaries, and they brought an army. It started with daily visits to my house. They'd show up at all hours, ringing the doorbell incessantly, knocking until their knuckles must have been raw. "Diane, we know you're in there," my mother would shout through the door. "This is ridiculous. We're your parents." When I didn't answer, they'd move to the windows, peering in, tapping on the glass. My neighbors started giving me concerned looks. The flying monkeys came next. Aunt Martha, my mother's sister, called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was in a client meeting. I let it go to voicemail, but her message was clear. "Diane, I'm appalled at how you're treating your parents. They gave you life, and this is how you repay them? By leaving them homeless? You should be ashamed." She'd never called me before, not once in my entire life, but suddenly she had opinions about my choices. Then came the church friends. My parents had apparently spun quite the tale at their weekly Bible study. I started getting calls from numbers I didn't recognize, all with the same message. "Your parents are such good people. The Bible says to honor thy father and mother. What kind of daughter turns away family?" Mrs. Henderson from their church actually showed up at my office to lecture me about Christian values. Cousin Brad, Kevin's best friend since childhood, posted on social media about how some people forget where they came from when they get a little success. He didn't name me directly, but the comments made it clear everyone knew who he meant. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly very concerned about family values and the treatment of elderly parents. My mother took the social media campaign to new heights. She posted old photos of her and my father, looking sad and vulnerable, with captions like, "Missing our family," and "Praying for reconciliation." The comments poured in, all sympathetic to them, all condemning the unnamed ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them. She never mentioned the $850,000. Never mentioned Kevin. Never mentioned that they'd chosen this. The workplace invasion was the breaking point. I was in the middle of presenting to potential clients a major contract that could take my business to the next level, when my assistant frantically gestured through the glass door. I excused myself for a moment to find my parents in the lobby, my mother crying dramatically while my father demanded to speak to me about urgent family business. "I'm so sorry," my mother wailed to the receptionist. "We haven't seen our daughter in weeks. We're just so worried about her. Is she eating? Is she okay?" The receptionist, barely out of college and completely unprepared for this level of manipulation, looked like she wanted to crawl under her desk. My clients could hear the commotion from the conference room. Security had to escort them out. My 70-year-old parents being removed by security from my place of business while my mother shouted, "We just want to talk to our daughter." What kind of world is this where parents can't see their own child? The clients were polite, but I could see the questions in their eyes. The contract went to another firm. Meanwhile, Kevin maintained complete radio silence. His social media, usually full of boastful posts about his business ventures, went quiet. Laura, however, was posting vacation photos from Hawaii. "Baby moon with my love," she captioned a photo of them on a beach, drinks in hand. "So blessed to be building our family in paradise. Paid for with my parents' retirement fund, no doubt." When my parents discovered I'd installed security cameras, they escalated further. The locksmith scam was almost clever. They showed up with a man in a van, claiming they'd lost their key and needed to get into their daughter's house. Fortunately, my neighbor Mrs. Chen recognized what was happening and called me immediately. I arrived home to find them arguing with the locksmith, who was refusing to open my door without proof of residency. "This is harassment," I told them flatly. "If you come here again, I'm calling the police." My father laughed bitterly. "Call them. We'll tell them how our daughter threw us out on the street. See how that looks for your precious business reputation." But I did call the police, and they did come, and my parents were warned about trespassing. The fake health emergency happened 2 days later. I got a call from the hospital saying my mother had been admitted with chest pains and had listed me as her emergency contact. I rushed there, despite everything, because what if it was real? I found her sitting up in bed, perfectly fine, chatting with a nurse about her ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her in her time of need. "Oh good, you're here," she said when she saw me, not a trace of illness in her voice. "Maybe now we can talk like civilized people." The nurse gave me a sympathetic look and quietly left. "You faked a heart attack?" I asked, incredulous. "I didn't fake anything. The stress you're causing me is real, Diane. The doctor says my blood pressure is through the roof." The doctor, when I tracked him down, told a different story. Her vitals are perfect for a woman her age. She insisted on admission for observation, but there's nothing wrong with her. He looked tired, like he'd seen this kind of manipulation before. "We'll be discharging her within the hour." The security cameras caught them trying windows at 2 in the morning the following week. My father with a crowbar, my mother keeping watch. The footage was clear enough for the police to take it seriously this time. "Do you want to press charges?" the officer asked. I looked at the grainy image of my parents, literally trying to break into my home, and felt nothing but exhausted sadness. "I want a restraining order," I said instead. The officer nodded. "Given the escalation and the evidence, that shouldn't be a problem. But you should know, they'll be served papers. This will be official." Official. Legal action against my own parents. The people who'd raised me, who'd given me life, who'd also given me a lifetime of feeling worthless compared to my brother. Emma called that night, having heard about the latest drama from Aunt Martha, who'd called her to complain about my heartlessness. "They're trying to break into your house now?" she asked, shocked. "Diane, this is insane. What about Kevin? Where is he in all this?" Kevin was in Hawaii, then Las Vegas, then Miami, according to Laura's Instagram. Living his best life on our parents' dime while they terrorized me for refusing to enable their choices. "I'm done," I told Emma. "I'm getting a restraining order. They can figure out their own lives." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Good," she said firmly. "It's about time. They made their choice, Diane. They chose Kevin. They always choose Kevin. You don't owe them anything." But even as I nodded, even as I knew she was right, part of me still felt like that little girl watching her brother get a car while she got a bus pass. The difference was, that little girl would have let them move in, would have sacrificed everything to earn a scrap of approval. The woman I'd become knew better. They'd taught me exactly how much I was worth to them, nothing. Now they were learning that nothing was exactly what they'd get in return. The dinner party was supposed to be a celebration. My company had just landed the biggest contract in our history, despite the earlier setback with my parents' office invasion. I'd invited my team, some close friends, and Mark's family to celebrate at our home. The evening was perfect, the kind where laughter flowed as freely as wine and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there. I should have known it couldn't last. We were halfway through dessert when I heard the commotion in the backyard. Through the French doors, I could see shadows moving near the garden lights. My heart sank as I recognized the figures. My parents had somehow gotten past the locked gate and were making their way toward the house. The restraining order papers were still being processed. My lawyer had warned me it could take another week. "Everyone stay here," Mark said quietly, but several guests had already noticed the intrusion. My business partner, Carla, looked concerned. "Is everything okay?" Before I could answer, my parents burst through the unlocked patio door like they owned the place. My mother's hair was disheveled, my father's face was red with exertion or anger or both. "There she is," my mother announced dramatically to the room full of stunned guests. "Our daughter, living it up while her parents suffer on the streets." The silence that followed was deafening. Forks suspended midway to mouths, conversations cut off mid-sentence, everyone frozen in a tableau of social horror. "You need to leave," I said, standing up slowly. "This is a private event, and you're trespassing." My father laughed, ugly and bitter. "Trespassing? In our daughter's home? The daughter who won't even give us a room while she hosts fancy parties?" He gestured wildly at the table, the catered food, the good wine. "Look at all this excess while we eat at soup kitchens." "Soup kitchens?" Mark's mother, Linda, spoke up. She knew the whole story, had been nothing but supportive. "Didn't you just give Kevin $850,000? The question hung in the air like a bomb. My professional colleagues were looking between us with barely concealed fascination. This was better than reality TV. My mother's mask finally slipped completely. "Kevin deserved that money. He's building something important. All Diane ever did was get lucky, and now she lords it over everyone with her success." There it was again. Lucky. In front of my colleagues, my employees, people who'd seen me work myself to the bone. Lucky? Carla stood up, all 5 feet 2 inches of her radiating indignation. "I've been Diane's partner for 5 years. I've seen her work 20-hour days, lose clients because she wouldn't compromise her ethics, build this company from nothing. That's not luck, that's dedication." But my parents weren't listening. They never listened. My father's explosion was volcanic. "You want to know the truth?" he shouted, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "We gave Kevin that money because he was supposed to be the successful one. He was our son, our pride. You were never supposed to amount to anything." The room gasped collectively, but he wasn't done. "Every award you won, every achievement, it was like a slap in the face. You were supposed to struggle, to need us, to make Kevin look better by comparison. But you had to go and prove us wrong, didn't you? Had to show everyone that our son was a failure and our daughter was the star. Do you know how that made us look?" The honesty was breathtaking in its cruelty. My mother tried to backtrack. "He doesn't mean that, he's just upset about our situation." But my father wasn't done. "Yes, I do mean it. We gave Kevin everything because he's a man, because he was supposed to carry on the family name with honor. Not hide behind some career like a spinster." "Spinster?" Mark stepped forward, rage radiating from every pore. "Your daughter is a successful entrepreneur, a loving wife, a respected member of this community. And you reduced her to a spinster because she didn't fail like you wanted her to?" Linda placed a hand on her son's arm, but her eyes were shooting daggers at my parents. Then, as if the evening couldn't get worse, Kevin walked in through the same patio door. He looked tanned from his vacations, wearing designer clothes that screamed new money. Laura wasn't with him, but his presence alone was enough to shift the entire dynamic. "Mom? Dad? What are you doing here?" he asked, as if he didn't know exactly what was happening. Kevin. My mother rushed to him like he was her savior. Thank God you're here. Talk some sense into your sister. She's being completely unreasonable. Kevin looked around the room, taking in the formal dinner party, the successful people, the evidence of a life well lived. His jaw tightened. Actually, he said, and I could see the manipulation forming, I'm here to talk to Diane too. He turned to me with false sincerity. Sis, I know things have been tough. The business is taking longer to get off the ground than expected. I was wondering if you could help out. Just a small loan. 50,000 should do it. The audacity left me speechless. He'd taken everything from our parents, left them homeless, and now he wanted my money too. Are you seriously asking me for money right now? I managed to say. After everything? He shrugged, unmoved. It's just business. I thought family helped family. But I guess that's only when it's convenient for you. Emma's face appeared on my laptop screen, which had been set up so she could join the celebration virtually. Kevin, you absolute parasite, she said, her British accent making the insult somehow more cutting. You took their entire retirement and now you want Diane's money too? Have you no shame? Stay out of this, Emma, Kevin snapped. You're not even here. No, but I can see everything clearly from here. You're a leech, and Mom and Dad enabled you their whole lives. Now you're all paying the price. My parents turned on her then, forgetting the room full of witnesses. How dare you speak to your brother that way, my mother shrieked. He's working hard to build a future. With their money. Emma shot back. While they harass Diane for a place to live. Where's their room in your McMansion, Kevin? Where's their return on investment? Kevin's face darkened. That's none of your business. Laura's pregnant, she needs space. Laura left you, my father said quietly, and the room went still again. What? Kevin turned to stare at him. She left 3 days ago. Took the kids. Said she's filing for divorce and wants half of everything, including the business investment. The dominoes were falling. Kevin had burned through their money, Laura was taking half in the divorce, and my parents were left with nothing. But instead of finally seeing Kevin for what he was, they turned their rage on me. This is your fault, my mother spat. If you'd just helped us, none of this would have happened. Enough. I'd reached my breaking point. You gave him everything. Every penny you had. You chose him over your own security, over your future, over your other children. You literally told me I was supposed to fail to make him look better. And now you want me to save you? To reward you for a lifetime of treating me like I was worthless? I looked around the room at my colleagues, my friends, my chosen family. These people have shown me more support and belief in one evening than you have in 34 years. You made your choice. You chose Kevin. You always chose Kevin. And now you get to live with that choice. But we're your parents, my father said weakly, all the fight drained out of him. No, I said firmly. You're Kevin's parents. You made that crystal clear. I'm just the daughter who was supposed to fail. Well, I didn't fail. I succeeded despite you, not because of you. And I'm not sacrificing my success to enable your favoritism any longer. The police arrived then, called by one of my neighbors who'd seen the backyard intrusion. As they escorted my parents and Kevin out, my mother turned back one last time. You'll regret this, Diane. When we're gone, you'll regret not helping us. No, I said quietly, but firmly. The only thing I regret is spending 34 years trying to earn love that was never mine to earn. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. I hope Kevin's business works out for you. As the police cars pulled away, my guests slowly began to breathe again. Carla raised her glass. To Diane, she said simply. For showing us all what strength really looks like. As everyone toasted, I felt something shift inside me. The little girl who'd always wondered why she wasn't enough finally had her answer. It was never about her. It was always about them. 3 months have passed since that explosive dinner party, and my life looks completely different now. Not in the ways you might expect. My business is still thriving, my marriage to Mark is stronger than ever, and I still live in the same house my parents tried to invade. The difference is in how I feel when I wake up each morning. For the first time in my life, I don't carry the weight of trying to earn love that was never freely given. My parents are living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. I know this not because I've seen them, but because Aunt Martha still occasionally tries to guilt me with updates. They're both working now, Dad as a greeter at a big box store, Mom as a cashier at a grocery chain. At 68 and 65, they're learning what it means to live paycheck to paycheck, something I knew intimately in my 20s while they were funding Kevin's dreams. Kevin's business failed spectacularly, as everyone except my parents could have predicted. The luxury car rental service never got off the ground. It turns out that actual investors, unlike parents blinded by favoritism, expect things like business plans and market research and proof of concept. The divorce from Laura was finalized last month. She got half of everything, including half of my parents' investment, which her lawyer successfully argued was a marital asset. Kevin is living in a studio apartment, working as a sales associate at a car dealership, the closest he's gotten to his luxury car dreams. My parents tried one last reconciliation attempt 6 weeks ago. They showed up at my office, not to cause a scene this time, but looking defeated and years older than their actual age. They wanted to talk, to explain, to perhaps apologize. But when I sat down with them in a nearby coffee shop, it became clear that nothing had really changed. They were sorry for their situation, not their choices. They still believed they'd done right by Kevin, that I was the unreasonable one for not understanding that boys need more help getting established. They still saw my success as luck and Kevin's failures as bad circumstances. I laid out my conditions for any relationship moving forward. They needed to acknowledge the favoritism, take responsibility for their choices, and respect my boundaries. They needed to accept that Kevin was responsible for his own failures and stop enabling him. Most importantly, they needed to see me as I am, not as the disappointing daughter who was supposed to fail. They listened, nodded, and then my mother said, "But you have to understand, Kevin is special to us in a way you'll never be." And that was that. Emma flew in from London last month for a long weekend. We spent hours talking about family, choices, and the freedom that comes from accepting people as they are rather than hoping they'll change. She'd been watching from afar, supporting me through video calls and messages, but being together in person was healing in ways I didn't expect. We made a pact to build our own traditions, to create the family we'd always wanted with people who actually valued us. My therapy sessions with Dr. Chen have evolved from crisis management to deeper work on self-worth and boundaries. Last week, she asked me to write a letter to my younger self, the little girl who got a bus pass while her brother got a car. I told that girl she was enough, had always been enough, and that one day she'd build a life so beautiful that she'd stop looking for approval in places it would never come from. Mark has been my rock through all of this. He's shown me what unconditional support looks like, something I didn't even know I was missing until I had it. His parents have become the family I always wanted. Linda calls me just to chat, asks about my day, celebrates my wins, and commiserates over my challenges without judgment or comparison. This is what healthy family relationships look like, and I'm grateful every day for their example. The business contract I lost due to my parents' office invasion led to something even better. One of the potential clients who witnessed that disaster reached out privately. He'd been impressed by how I handled the situation and wanted to work with someone who could maintain professionalism under that kind of personal pressure. His company became our biggest client, and he's referred 3 others. Sometimes what looks like failure is just success in disguise. Last week, I ran into my parents at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen them since the coffee shop meeting. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of their choices. My mother was comparing prices on items she used to buy without thinking. My father was checking a list, probably to make sure they stayed within budget. They saw me but didn't approach. We existed in the same space for a moment, strangers who happened to share DNA, and then I moved on. The most profound change has been in how I define family. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, who support you without conditions. It's Mark, Emma, my business partner Carla, my friends who've become sisters, my in-laws who've shown me what parental love should look like. It's the community I've built based on mutual respect and genuine care. I'm at peace now in a way I never was before. Success isn't about proving my parents wrong anymore, it's about living a life aligned with my values. I donate to organizations that help young people escape toxic family situations and build independent lives. I mentor young women who remind me of myself, talented but doubting their worth because someone who should have loved them unconditionally didn't. Sometimes loving yourself means letting go of those who can't love you properly. My parents made their choice, and they're living with the consequences. Kevin made his choices, and he's facing his own reality. I made my choice too, to stop being the supporting character in their narrative and become the protagonist of my own story. And for the first time in 34 years, I'm truly happy. If you've made it this far in my story, you probably understand something about complicated family dynamics and the pain of being unseen by those who should see you most clearly. I want you to know that you're not alone, and that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. What boundaries have you had to set with family members who couldn't respect your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the most difficult circumstances. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're enough, just as they are. Thank you for listening to my truth, and remember, you deserve to be chosen first by the people who claim to love you.